Keep watching to see America in the Bible. There's good news in the end, but what you will see allegedly happening in chapter 11 may happen in the very near future. Don't forget to share, subscribe, ring the bell for more content, and smash that like button. Did you know that some words in the Old and New Testament translations of the Bible were added so the verses would make sense to the reader? The Old Testament version of the Bible was translated from the original Hebrew Masoretic text, but some words in Bible translations are omitted in that text. Albeit, in the book of Daniel, we will focus only on one specific word, and that word is sacrifice. The one and only verse where it is actually present, in the original text of this book, is verse 27 of chapter 9, and we will discover allegedly why that is.
Now we would like to offer a disclaimer. We are not claiming that the interpretation of Bible prophecy seen in this video will happen exactly as portrayed. The purpose of this video is to demonstrate how the absence of the word sacrifice in the original Hebrew Masoretic text could leave one to assume a totally different outcome interpretation-wise than previously accepted by most Bible scholars. The interpretation that you are about to see is based on that assumption. In this chapter, Daniel dreamed of the four beasts seen here in the first year of Belshazzar, the Babylonian king. In chapter 8, he sees another vision in the third year of the same king. That chapter has the same beasts, the Grecian, Roman, and the one that allegedly comes from two of the four, the Little Horn Nation.
The Little Horn Nation is an 11th horn that came up from among the 10 horns on the beast seen beside me. It has eyes like a man and a mouth speaking great things. But who is he, and where does he come from? Please keep watching to see.
In this graph, you can see allegedly how the Little Horn Nation came out of two of the four beasts, those being the English and Roman empires. The third empire is a leopard, depicted in the next chapter as a he-goat with a great horn between its eyes. Both are referring to the Grecian Empire. However, in that chapter, the angel interprets the great horn as, quote, the first king.
The first king is from the English Empire, the lion, with the wings of an eagle. The wings were plucked off and allegedly became America. America was birthed from one of four sub-kingdoms that joined together to form the English Empire. And that sub-kingdom was Wessex. Britain was one of the 10 horns on the fourth beast, the Roman Empire. From Britain came England, from England came the 11th horn, the alleged Little Horn Nation, America. Accordingly, this means that from within America, you can expect to see a political leader rise with a mouth speaking great things.
Did you know that the Little Horn Nation grew great even unto God in heaven? Daniel chapter 8 verse 10 says, "And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them." That's amazing, but what about these other things it describes? This verse has baffled Bible scholars for many years, but in verse 9, it says the Little Horn Nation also grew great toward a land called the Pleasant Land. The words pleasant land could be translated to mean a land of notable beauty, a land with roebuck deer. This could be describing the North American continent, allegedly, the very land where the Little Horn Nation cast down some of the other hosts or armies that came to explore, and where it cast down of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them, the various tribes of Native American Indians who were already on the North American continent.
Remember how Ryan said that some words in the Bible are omitted in the original text? Well, these 3 verses you see here are a prime example. In fact, all words that are in bold print and in italic anywhere in the Bible are not written in the original text, but rather put there by translators so the verses would make sense to the reader. But this could cause the meaning of some verses to be totally misinterpreted. For example, the word sacrifice in each of these verses are not in the original Hebrew Masoretic text, and accordingly, should have been translated without using it. So what does this all mean? Well, I'll explain it this way. Many Bible scholars believe that these verses are conveying a picture of the mouth of the little horn causing the daily sacrifices in the third Jewish temple to cease, but accordingly, they may not.
If you take the word sacrifice out of these verses, it will say that the daily was taken away in verse 11, and an host was given him against the daily, by reason of transgression in verse 12, and how long shall be the vision concerning the daily, and the transgression of desolation in verse 13. The word daily is translated to mean that which is done in continuity. Accordingly, these verses could be saying that the mouth of the little horn will put an end to that which is done in continuity, and will cast down the host and his sanctuary. But now, this sheds a different light on the words host and sanctuary, meaning, these verses may not be describing a priest as the host, or the third Jewish temple as the sanctuary, but accordingly, it could be describing a specific leader, and the embodiment of his sacred institution. This transgression of desolation will last for 2,300 days or approximately 6 years and 3 months.
Now that we know the mouth of the little horn will cast down the host, and allegedly, the embodiment of his sacred institution, let's compare that to the time frame he is given, after it's desecrated with a talking icon of himself, and how long he is given to trot in Jerusalem underfoot and persecute the saints. So Benson, why does it say that the mouth of the little horn will be given 42 months in these verses here, but say he will be given 2,300 days, or 6 years and 3 months in the verses Ryan just talked about?
Good question, Ariah. That's because the time frame of the 2,300 days, or 6 years and 3 months, is the starting point of him allegedly receiving political power, albeit through corruption. However, somewhere along the time frame, the embodiment of the sacred institution will be desecrated, but afterward, there will only be 42 months left for him to continue his reign of turmoil.
So how does this time frame compare to the one given in Daniel chapter 9 verse 27, where it says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week or 7 years"?
Another good question. But that verse brings us to another distinction to be made, but I'll let Ryan explain that in the next segment.
Allow me to further explain. The sacrifice and oblation occurring in this verse is the reason why the word sacrifice was not omitted in the original Hebrew Masoretic text. But according to the alleged portrayal of how the host and the embodiment of his sacred institution was cast down and trampled underfoot in the previous chapter, it would appear that this verse could be misunderstood by most Bible scholars. That's because this verse could be describing how, according to Luke's Gospel, Luke 4:17, Jesus Christ went into the synagogue at the beginning of his ministry, and read a portion of the book of Isaiah, chapter 61 verses 1 and 2, about the coming Messiah, himself, and then said those words were fulfilled in their hearing. 3.5 years later, Jesus was crucified, thereby causing the daily sacrifice and oblation to cease in the then Jewish temple. In addition to this understanding, the mouth of the little horn will indeed desecrate the third Jewish temple, sitting therein, and declaring himself as God, according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4, and does that sometime during his reign of turmoil for 42 months. As you can see, Benson, so far, there is a lot going on, and especially in this chapter.
There certainly is. That's why Ariah and I will take turns reading a few key verses and let you explain what's going on, since you have that cool British accent.
Why, thank you, but first I need to set the backdrop. What you will see from this point forward will all be alleged based on what's been previously alleged. It must be understood that in this chapter, there is a lack of chronological order with some verses. For example, when the verses are read from top to bottom, some verses are homogeneous to others, meaning alike, but separate occurrences. And some are analogous, meaning comparable in certain respects, typically in a way which makes clearer the nature of the things compared to what's described in other verses, but I will note these as we go along. Allegedly, there are several modern nations and kingdoms seen in this chapter, those being the Kingdom of the North, Russia, the Kingdom of the South, America, the Glorious Land, Israel, then Edom, Moab, Ammon, and an anonymous leader with a coalition of, quote, great forces, allegedly the 10 horns, seen in verse 10. We also see Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopia.
Well said. Now, I'll start with verse 5. It says, "And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion."
The leader of the Kingdom of the South, the alleged Little Horn nation, will be strong, but one of his princes, the alleged mouth of the Little Horn, shall be strong above him and have great dominion. This so-called prince is whom the book of Revelation calls the beast. Specifically in chapter 17 verse 8, where it states, "He once was in power, then not, yet shall be." Accordingly, he's a loud-mouthed defunct leader of the Little Horn nation who will once again convince people to follow him, and will ultimately have greater dominion than the current leader. It makes you think, how could a prince ever be stronger or have greater dominion than the current king or leader? Well, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 depicts him as a lawless individual and then talks about those enthralled to him, believing a lie, upon whom God will send strong delusion.
Verse 6. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together. For the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm. But she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times.
Verses 10 and 21 through 28 are analogous to this one. The king's daughter, could be referring to the embodiment of the alleged Little Horn nation, is describing how a group of brokers, including the nation that begat her, allegedly England, will go to the leader of Russia, to make a political agreement that allows the leader of the Little Horn nation to have some sort of co-equal power with the mouth of the Little Horn. This happens, by reason of transgression, according to Daniel chapter 8 verse 12, allegedly, by the rebellion that tore the Little Horn nation apart on behalf of the beast seen in Revelation chapter 17. That involved an economic collapse and subsequent destruction of Babylon, the alleged great city of the Little Horn nation that originated there and spread throughout the world. But the outcome of the political agreement will not be favorable toward the Little Horn nation nor its current leader.
Verse 10. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come, and overflow, and pass through. Then shall he return, and be stirred up, even to his fortress.
This verse is analogous to verse 6 and homogeneous to verse 31. The sons of the alleged mouth of the Little Horn will be stirred up, and therefore they themselves assembled a multitude of great forces against the agreement made on behalf of their father. Apparently, his sons want him to have all the political power. It goes on to describe how a leader of that assembly came and overflowed, and passed through, then returned to his own land and stirred up against his own fortress. This overflowing leader could be describing the friend of the alleged mouth of the Little Horn, the leader of North Korea, coming and overflowing, then returning and stirring up conflict against his neighbor, the South, which would be a perfect opportunity in his mind for such geopolitical conflict.
Verse 31. And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that makes it desolate.
This verse is homogeneous to verse 10, and no doubt the same alleged rogue army from the 10 horns. Allegedly, this is when the talking icon, in the likeness of the mouth of the Little Horn, will be placed, standing, inside the embodiment of the sacred institution for the whole world to see. Accordingly, this would have to be what Jesus called the abomination of desolation in Mark chapter 13 and Matthew 24. It's important to understand that the abomination of desolation in this verse occurs for 42 months, and the transgression of desolation according to chapter 8 verses 12 and 13 occurs for 2,300 days or 6 years and 3 months. The former occurs on the back end of the latter, are two separate occurrences and allegedly, neither have anything to do with the third Jewish temple, as we discovered by the absence of the word sacrifice in the original Hebrew Masoretic text.
Verse 45. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him.
Verses 16 through 18 and 41 are analogous to this one, but in the end, he will position himself somewhere in Jerusalem, between the Mediterranean and Dead Seas, will enter the third Jewish temple, and sit inside the Holy of Holies declaring himself as God, according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4. Albeit he will have no more allies, and no one will come to his aid any more. However, we do see a picture of him in the book of Revelation gathered with the kings of the earth at the Battle of Armageddon, just before Jesus opens the sky and comes in the company of his Father's angels and his saints, coming in great glory and furious power.
In summary, let's quickly recap what has been alleged in this video. In Chapter 7, we discovered that the Little Horn Nation was formed out of Wessex, one of the 4 sub-kingdoms of the first beast, interpreted as the first king, the lion with eagle's wings, the wings representing America, from where the mouth of the Little Horn arises. In Chapter 8, we discovered that the first horrifying act of the mouth of the Little Horn is to cast down the host of the Little Horn Nation and trample him and the embodiment of his sacred institution underfoot for 2,300 days, or 6 years and 3 months, and that sometime within that time frame, it will be desecrated with a talking icon of himself standing therein, and that this act is what Jesus spoke about in Mark chapter 13 and Matthew 24.
We also discovered that after the desecration, the mouth of the little horn will only be given 42 months to continue his reign of turmoil. In chapter 9, verse 27, we discovered that the last 7 years of the 490-year time frame given to Daniel may not be referring to the mouth of the little horn, but rather to Jesus Christ. Finally, in chapter 11, we saw a culmination of truth, spoken by the angel, allowing Daniel to see the expanded picture of what the mouth of the little horn does, right up until the end. The good news is, after his 6 years and 3 months of casting down the host and the embodiment of his sacred institution, Daniel chapter 8 verse 14 says it will be cleansed, which tells us that although Jesus Christ will be back on earth ruling and reigning at the time, it appears as though the Lord still has great plans for the by then former little horn nation. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and please feel free to copy the link to share it with whomever and wherever you like.